Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here tonight. I am really thrilled to be here talking with you. Just to give you a little bit of info about why I'm here doing that. My name's Lydia and I am late diagnosed as autistic. I only found out in the last year that I am autistic and most likely also ADHD. Being on this journey at this point in my life has helped me to realise that there are so many things that would have helped me if I'd have understood when I was younger. Going through this experience with my daughter, who was diagnosed in late year 3, going into year 4, where things became suddenly very, very difficult for her. It's helped me to open up this whole world of how we think differently, how we experience the world differently. I've worked in education for 15 years and still so much stuff is new to me now. So the last year or two, well, about 2 years that I've been working with Autistic Girls Network, I've become a group facilitator, peer support worker and trainer. So I'm hoping tonight to share some lived experience with you. I'm very open to any questions. If you want to look at some specifics or understand a little bit more about what specifically your child might be experiencing, do feel free to ask. First of all, though, I'm going to go through a bit of a presentation to help you understand why day-to-day occurrences can be so much more exhausting for your autistic young person. If you are neurotypical, there will be situations every day that your young person is navigating that will take so much more energy for them than they would for you. And why would you know that? Of course, you're not experiencing that. So we need to try and help shed some light on that. Today's session is all about energy accounting. We're going to start off by looking at the things that can take that extra energy, why it can use so much more energy for your young person, and then thinking about what we can do. How can we help with that? How can we support? So just as an overview, some of you may be very, very new to this world of neurodiversity. You may be on the start of this path and understanding. Some of you may be very used to it. So we're just going to start off with the brief overview of neurodiversity. We have neurodiversity, all different kinds of thinking, and we have the majority of people who are neurotypical, and we have neurodivergent people. Now, neither is better or worse, neither is the right way to be. And that's what our mission is, to get more people and society as a whole to understand that autistic people and neurodivergent people just see the world differently, they experience it differently, and they think differently. It's not disordered, it's not a deficit, and there's no right or wrong. But living in a world that is designed for a majority doesn't always work for us. And that means we need to replenish our energy much, much more. Daily occurrences are more tiring for us. So your neurodivergent young people, your autistic child, or the people that you're working with, they will physically experience the world in a different way. That can mean communication. It can mean relaxation, play, how we choose to spend our time. And certainly we experience the world with very, very different sensory experiences. They may be heightened or less than other people experience. And because of this, the world can be so much more intense. It can be like someone's turned that switch right up. Everything's bigger, brighter, louder. The smells are more intense. And that's exhausting. It can feel really overwhelming. And that's when we're going to start seeing those struggles. If people hide how they're feeling, when things become too much, we become exhausted. And when we're exhausted, we can no longer try to fit and no longer say it's okay. So we need to balance our energy so that we're feeling well and healthy, and that young person is not being overwhelmed. They're not going to be able to get the best from school, to learn, to enjoy social time, to enjoy family time, if they are so overwhelmed by all these differences. And it's not the person that we need to change, it's the environment. So what we need to have a think about there, breaking those areas down. So communication, leisure and play, and senses. We're going to have a quick look through why these things can be much more challenging for your young person. So communication. That's going to take a huge amount of energy. That as a neurotypical person, communication comes very easily, it's very natural, it just happens, you have an exchange and then it's done. For an autistic person, particularly a young person who is finding those first sort of social interactions, verbal communication, it's challenging. Verbal communication involves trying to interpret tone of voice, perhaps subtle sarcasm. Very often they may say something that is then misunderstood, or they might misunderstand the way that someone else is speaking. Huge emotions are involved. We may then feel silly or embarrassed that we've misunderstood something, or we might feel that we already have that sense of feeling different and we're nervous to talk or speak in the way that feels comfortable to us. You're trying to read body language and facial expressions, and very often those very subtle things can be really hard for an autistic person to read. We might process subtle things a bit differently or miss them. And executive functioning, all of these things combined, we're having to actually think about these things and put them into place. So that's something that happens very, very naturally for a neurotypical person. But imagine if you had to really think about every element of your speech. Imagine if you had to script every conversation. And very often, autistic people will script conversations in advance to reduce anxiety. We may think through every scenario. If I'm going to an appointment, the chances are I've planned in my head, what's likely to happen when I walk in? Will there be a receptionist? They might say this to me. Then I'll respond with this, or they might say this. And in that case, I'll do that. All of this requires a huge amount of energy. So if we think about that and take it to the next step, imagine, look at this sketch. You've got the neurotypical person there in the blue jumper and the autistic person there in the green jumper. Now, for a neurotypical person, when there's a misunderstanding, the expectation or the assumption is that the autistic person has made an error or has got that wrong. So we see a miscommunication. So when you don't understand me, it's because you've got poor understanding skills. It's you who doesn't understand me. And when I don't understand you, it's because your communication skills are bad. So you're not hearing and understanding, and also you're speaking incorrectly. The emphasis is falling on the autistic person because they process differently to change and to fit, instead of there being a little bit more understanding on both sides of the conversation. So think about situations with your child or the person that you work with. Think about times where perhaps they go very quiet during a conversation. It's almost like that battery cuts out, or they're struggling to read a situation. Reading facial expressions can be incredibly difficult. So a very obvious happy smiley face, okay. A very angry, aggressive, like shouting face, okay. But what about something more subtle? What about when I'm just looking blank like this and I'm listening and I'm processing? For an autistic person, that's not a clear indicator of how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking. So they then are also having to interpret and think all these different scenarios of what you might be thinking, because you're no longer predictable. It's not that clear. And very often, again, for a neurotypical person, they can kind of make an assumption and predict where that situation is going. But it's going to be harder for your autistic young person. So there's challenges interpreting the expressions, interpreting the body language. There may be sensory differences like auditory processing. I have very, very sensitive hearing, hyperacusis, very sensitive. In a calm space, I can hear every tiny detail and I can't filter that excess noise out. So I can cope with that in a quiet space. But put me into a busy space like a classroom where suddenly there might be lots of children moving around, lots of noise. You know, it's overloading. Someone's clicking their pen, someone's tapping on the desk, all these different sounds that can feel unbearable. So if someone then tries to talk directly, I'm going to find it harder to hear them because I can't filter everything else out. So if your child is coming home and saying they are exhausted, they're tired, they're headachy, thinking that they may well have experienced a completely different time in that classroom to their peers, that's why sometimes they're going to be saying that they're having a tough time when others say it's been a good day. Trying to understand tones of voice as well can be tricky, and small talk. What is very, very natural for neurotypical people, frills and fancies in conversation, the niceties. It's an expectation. It's considered to be polite. But actually, for an autistic person, it's a whole lot of extra information to cut through when we're already trying to navigate all of those things. So if you're a neurotypical person, just take a moment and imagine what it would be like to have to put that much energy into every conversation all day, every day. For people you know, you get to read them a little bit easier, you get more comfortable with their expressions. But if you're in school all day or in a social club or activity, you don't have that safety net. You don't know these people. New people are much, much harder to read and to communicate with. So social interactions can be really difficult. They can be hard to navigate. You might find that the young person struggles with arguments and conflict because they're really hard to understand. It's hard to anticipate what somebody's angry at, if they're angry with each other, if they're angry at you. You're trying to pick out those facial expressions. Groups can be overwhelming because think of everything I've just said one-to-one, and then add 5, 6, 7, 8 more people, or a crowd of people. You might find that situations where people are being very competitive is quite stressful. Team events, sporting events, because that can feel overwhelming as well. It can almost feel like conflict. And you might find that the young person much prefers and enjoys clear instructions, plans to be made in advance. It gives that sense of security. It's predictable. They might appreciate warning if things change. If we can avoid last minute changes, that really helps. It will reduce anxiety. If you've got a plan and that autistic child is counting on that plan and they've prepared for it, and there's a sudden last minute change, that's going to be a huge knock. It's going to create anxiety. It's going to drain their energy, and they're going to be less able to then cope with any of the challenges that might come along with the event. They may prefer less crowded spaces, calmer environments, and that's okay. Trying to make sure that we understand our needs, that they are different, not wrong, and make sure that we balance that calm time with the busy time. We're not saying that every autistic child will never want to go to a party or a busy place. We're saying we want to make the environments accessible for them. And that can mean small adjustments, and it can also mean our own energy accounting, planning for our energy. So a social event might be enjoyable. Your young person might be really enjoying that party, but you can see they're suddenly dipping. That social battery can just cut out. Imagine all the things that are happening, a busy, loud space, lots of conversation, lots of chatter, lots of navigating party games, for example. And then you bring in the idea of sensory overload. We've got to be very aware of that to help support them. So we come on to relaxation and play. Autistic play is valid, and it's really important that we assure them you might play differently, you might enjoy different things. It is no better or worse, it's just different. So autistic play might be more playing alongside, more sort of collaborative play where they want to play alongside somebody, but not necessarily interacting with something. Less competitive things, so maybe like skipping ropes, playing alongside someone, you're doing something together, but it's still independent. They might want calm, they might need quiet more often to just take breathers from that sensory overload. A loud playground is going to be really tricky because it's unstructured, it's chaotic, you don't know how everyone's going to get on, what the game is, people might be arguing. And thinking that neurotypical fun, many of their peers might enjoy the loud, busy places, you know, the fairgrounds, the theme park, the parties, and they may well want to be part of that, and they can be, as long as we give them that boost of energy first and the calming down time after. And lots of planning, as much information in advance as possible will help to boost that energy to feel confident about an event. Special interests. Lots of you might have already identified that person, that child in your life, that they have something that they are really passionate about, something that they really love. And that special interest might really stand out, might be quite different to their peers, or it might be very much in line with their peers, but they feel much more intensely about it. And they really want to spend the majority of their time on that. And that means it can be hard to keep up with passing trends, you know, whatever the latest music is, the latest film. They might fall out of sync a little bit with their peers because of that, because they want to dedicate more time to the special interest. And the reason for that is it brings so much joy and it brings calm, it brings safety. Your special interest, you know that subject, you feel confident talking about it and you want to share it. It's a sign of joy to share that with somebody else. So it can be that that is a brilliant way to regulate, but it can also put pressure on our energy then to still fit in the homework and the chores and all the other things that are less appealing. And it can also feel upsetting if people don't understand how much that means to you, or they don't want to talk about it again, but actually you do. So again, it's things like this that can boost energy, but also strain it sometimes. And that's why we're going to look at those techniques very soon of how we balance that energy. So that final area that we mentioned before, sensory overload, this is a huge one. one of the most draining things when it comes to that energy that we really need to balance. So everyday environments can be overwhelming. The person may feel like they suddenly get overloaded and might need to snap and just need to be left alone, or they might need to hide completely, shut down, walk away from a situation. This is where you're going to see that response, that physical sort of outburst or shut down. It requires huge amounts of energy to manage the differences that we experience every day as an autistic person. So imagine as a child, before you know what's happening, before you know how your mind works differently, before you know what your sensory needs are, this just all feels really, really confusing. And you have that sense that you are different, but you don't know how or why. And you don't know yet that it's fine that you have different needs, and you certainly don't know how to meet them. So the sensory world is incredibly overwhelming. It may be that the smell, a teacher's perfume, which is a really beautiful, expensive perfume, and to everyone else, oh, it's lovely. But to you, it's overwhelming. It makes you physically feel like, oh, I can't breathe it in. It may be an aversion to a food smell where walking into the school dining hall makes you feel physically unwell and that you cannot sit there. And that can produce quite an extreme reaction. The child saying, I refuse to go in, I can't eat lunch there. It's really important that we believe and listen to that experience, because it is so incredibly exhausting for that young person to be discounted, to be told, it's not that loud. Oh, it's not that smelly. Get over it. It's fine. You're okay. Nobody else is struggling. Nobody else is fussing. These are all things that they will probably hear frequently, because if people aren't aware, if they're not aware that your child is experiencing sensory differences, they aren't going to understand that that can be a physical response, and the child isn't fussing. They are genuinely experiencing this discomfort. So if we can believe and give them the confidence to advocate and to say what these differences are, what they're struggling with, again, we can help them to put those adjustments in place and support their energy. So sensory overload can look like any of these things. It can be the sharp noise, the constant loud speaking. If you've got very sensitive hearing, neurotypical people chatting, having a good laugh, booming conversation, you may feel like you just need to take it all down or step away. Food textures, bright lights, walking into a classroom at school where everything's fluorescent strip lighting and feeling like you just physically want to hide away. Physical contact, getting knocked around, pushed in the corridors, trying to get to your locker, PE, whistles blowing, getting nudged. All of these things whilst you're wearing a really uncomfortable school uniform that's rubbing and the label's horrible. It can take 45 minutes here to help assist my child getting into her school uniform, several undresses, repositioning the tie, and she is physically overwhelmed and struggling and uncomfortable, and she has to go and spend a day like that. So obviously your neurotypical peers, they're not noticing these problems, they're not dealing with that, whereas your young autistic person may be dealing with all of these sensory factors all day, feeling physically uncomfortable. That is draining too. So we've looked at those key factors. If we don't know what's causing the overload, if we don't know what's draining the energy, we can't help them to balance and account it. So all of those things could be going on. Your young person might be quite clear about that with you or with school, and they might express that. But if not, they might be masking. So if you get that very sudden explosion when they come home from school, if in school, if you're a teacher and they seem absolutely fine when they're in school, but parents are saying to you, they get home and they're just distraught, or they melt down, or they explode, they might be masking. And that is when an autistic person tries to fit in, they don't want to show the differences, or they feel that they can't, they don't feel in a safe space to be themselves. They might be rehearsing those conversations, like I explained, scripting, mimicking social behaviour of others, literally looking around, trying to fit. They might appear more shy or avoiding interaction with others, hiding that sensory discomfort, fighting your natural urge to stim. The need to move about. If you've got that physical energy or the repetitive motion, maybe it's just twisting your hair. A lot of people do that. Now writing, lots of typical people have these patterns that just help us to regulate. But for an autistic person, they might need to do that more, and they're suppressing that need. Making eye contact can feel unbearable. I did not realize at my age, over 40, that I've spent my whole life concentrating on, am I looking at them in the right way? Am I looking for too long? I need to break eye contact. Oh, look, there's a bird. Oh, I need to check something in my handbag. Making excuses to break eye contact because I don't want to be rude, but I am also struggling because it's absolutely exhausting me to keep that intense eye contact. It feels uncomfortable to me. And then I'm anxious, and then I'm worrying more about the conversation. So hiding all those things, again, I would like you to imagine that you are taking part in a play, you're up on that stage for 2 hours, you're giving it all you've got. But then you get off the stage, don't you? And you go and you relax and you're yourself. Imagine you had to be in that play all day, every day, and you couldn't relax. And actually, you don't get that many intervals, you don't get that many breaks through the day. So again, that's something we need to look at doing, bringing in that energy accounting, the breaks as needed. Masking is exhausting. People who mask will need more breaks throughout the day. It might be movement breaks to let off that steam. It might be calm breaks to just have a breather. They might not feel able to participate in all the activities that their peers do. And they might find that they need calm and they need rest punctuating the day or in busy social activities. So it's really important, if you know that your young person has maybe a party at the weekend coming up, or you know you're going to take them out in the evening, there's a family do, and they're going to be out later than usual, planning for calm, a quiet day, a lazy day, doing whatever it is that they enjoy, their special interests, or just a duvet day, just watching movies and being cuddly and their favorite foods. Really give them that calm, then the event, and then give them that calm again afterwards. And it might be that they don't want calm. They might need movement. They might want to be busy at home. Whatever it is for them that brings them that peace, we need to kind of bring that in. So very often when we're working with schools, so for any of the teachers who are online tonight, if you're thinking this sounds familiar for one of your pupils, if they're really struggling with the school day, perhaps they're masking really intensely, just a 2-minute breather when everything gets too busy in the classroom, a 2-minute breather to go outside and have that moment to decompress, or colouring for 2 or 3 minutes in a sensory space. Whatever brings their focus back to calm can just punctuate. It gives them that interval in the performance. And masking isn't a choice. It's survival. It's the need to not feel like you're othered compared to the rest of the group. And it's also trying to detract from potentially what is getting attention that may become bullying behaviour, being seen differently. If we let that struggle show and we melt down or we burst out, then obviously we're going to feel very self-conscious to our peers. So these are all things that your young person will be thinking about. And very often these worries go round and round on loop. If you mask, your thoughts are very often very busy. You're kind of putting all those struggles inwards rather than outwards. And that brings us on to that kind of final part of the why life is more draining and why we need to energy account. So if we don't help that young person to balance the energy, if we don't help them to learn what are the things that make them really drained and what gives them the energy, we're going to get into these sort of 3 areas. And that is shutdown, which is an inward response when everything gets too much and we're just too exhausted. And it's usually a withdrawal. It's, as it sounds, a shutdown, like I want to hide, I look away. Your young person, if they're in a social situation with you, maybe you bump into a neighbour, oh, say hi to Bob, and they hide away. And maybe they cower behind you a little bit and they're like, no, you talk. No, that shutdown, that removal, I can't do it. Or you have meltdown, which is that outward response, the burst of I can't do it anymore. And at that point, the child may lose ability to communicate clearly. They may lose verbal communication and become situationally mute. That crosses over with shutdown. After that meltdown, you may see them then go into that retreat. The meltdown is going to be very clear. It might look angry. Often people will misunderstand and label it as a tantrum. I cannot express enough that a meltdown is not a tantrum. It's not a choice, and it's not a behavior to try and get something or to manipulate or to, create an outcome. A meltdown is you've shaken that bottle and you've opened the lid and it's exploded. There is no way to contain those huge feelings anymore, and there's no way to communicate them. So that is when the energy is just done. And then if we get beyond those points and we see those happening more and more often, more shutdowns, more meltdowns, the danger is we're heading towards burnout. And burnout is when it's at a point where they have no energy left to give. And that might be where you are finding you can't get the young person to school. They physically cannot people anymore. That was my daughter's words at one point. I just can't do it. I can't people today. I can't talk to my friends. I don't even want to see my friends. I love them, but I know if I go in today, I'm going to shout. I'm going to get angry at them. I'm going to be upset. And I don't want to make people feel bad. And then that spiral starts again. The people pleasing, the worrying, and trying to navigate things. Now, if we get to burnout, this can actually make them almost sort of go backwards, reverse a little bit in their skills, lose that kind of ability in areas that they were usually okay in, like, well, they were always fine chatting with people, they were always fine going to parties, things like that, where actually they may no longer be able to do those things. So it's so important to spot these warning signs before we get to burnout. And that's what we're going to look at for our energy accounting. So as we mentioned earlier, as Louise said, we're going to come to some questions at the end of this. I'm going to run through some strategies that we can use now and then answer as many questions as I can. But for energy accounting, first of all, we're going to think about different methods that we can use. So it's really important that we keep the social battery charged. Try and think of it like that. And if you're working with young children especially, you can give them lots of lovely visuals. You can explain it in lots of different ways. There might be something to do with your child's special interest or your student's special interest that will make you feel like, oh, I can use that in some kind of visual for them, or I can use it to explain it to them. So energy accounting is the idea, think of it for us, for older students maybe, and for older children, as like a bank account. If you keep taking money out, it's going to run out, isn't it? Unless you top it up. So to keep a nice balance and to make sure that we can still enjoy shopping and buy the nice treats, we've got to put the money in as well as taking it out. So you could equate that to whatever your child enjoys. Maybe it's an online game that they use credits for. You've got to top up. If you've spent all your tokens, you've got to top them up. Whatever you think will kind of make them go, oh, I get that. You can make it personal. So we need to understand what is that individual's version of a withdrawal and what is their idea of that deposit, the top up. And that will be specific to every individual child and person as they grow. It's going to be something that matters to them, not a generic thing. So we all start the day with different energy levels. So imagine your child or young person is going into class with 30 other children. Every one of those, neurotypical and neurodivergent, will all be starting at different energy levels. You might have had a really bad night's sleep. You might have a bit of a cold. Maybe the car wouldn't start and mum was getting a bit stressed and worried and you got anxious. All of these things are going to knock your energy level. So actually, you're coming in with your social battery sort of here rather than nice and full. So if we think about that, we need to make sure that when they're going into an environment that could be challenging, so school, a club, an activity, something new, we need to top that battery up as high as we can before they go in and help them to learn what tops it up. So if the energy levels get too low throughout the day, more meltdowns are likely, more shutdowns are likely, and the more they happen, the more tired you are. So we need to make sure that we're recharging that battery throughout the day. It's going to need regular plugins, regular charges. And if we don't recharge it regularly, that social battery for an autistic child can just stop. It can just cut out. It could be in the middle of a class where they're asked to contribute something. It could be the child who you notice in class just zones out and just isn't listening anymore. That can be an actual involuntary done, like the power's gone down. So again, maybe your child has a favorite toy that's like a battery toy or something, and you can explain and say, look, it's cut the power. Maybe use fairy lights to show them it turns on and off. Anything like that that will create a visual to help, and we can link that into this sort of idea. So have a little look through that list there. The key points that I would pick out, so withdrawals, things that are going to drain that battery and take energy out. Socializing, all the information we've just looked at, we know socializing is going to be tiring. A change to routine can be really, really hard. An autistic person, a young child particularly, who is kind of learning all these strategies, once you've got a routine set, that's predictable, it's nice and safe. If we change it, that's going to be taking our energy. It's going to be confusing. The sensory side of things, all those issues that we've already looked at, but I also want to really pick out on their empathy. Now, a lot of people will have the misconception that being autistic means that you don't have empathy, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Very, very often, autistic people will be highly empathetic. They will feel such deep connection to their special interest, to animals, to plants and nature. You know, the child who sees others in the playground stamping on ants on purpose or plucking daisies and treading on them, that feels distressing and painful to watch. That can feel so intensely unfair and unkind because of the heightened sense of social justice. Very often, autistic children will have an intense sense of social justice. So the playground is hard. Watching people maybe tell fibs, getting someone else in trouble. You know what's just happened and you can't fix it. And all of these things are exhausting. And you're at school and you're dealing with all of that. And you're feeling a bit on the edge because all of this is hard and you kind of get on with everyone, but you don't quite fit right in the middle of anywhere. And you're trying to take all of that on board whilst multitasking. You're being asked to do lots of different things throughout the day. All of that is going to be cognitive overload. You're trying to process so many different situations and instructions and your lessons, and you're having to compute these kind of conversations that other people, it just runs naturally. So those kind of things are withdrawals. But your own child or young person that you work with will have their own specific examples. So finding a time that you can chat with them, it's usually better rather than sitting and doing an intense talk and focusing on it. Maybe it's whilst you're doing a fun day out, maybe you're going for a walk, walking the dog, going for a bike ride, trying to get an idea from them. What are those things? What are those things that if they had to spend a token and give that energy away, what's taking all those tokens? And then we need to think of the good stuff, the deposits, what's going to put energy back into that bank. So it's the special interest, structure, predictability. It makes us feel safe. Being consistent, keeping promises. I can't stress that enough. For so many autistic children, if you've said you'll do something, that is solid. That is a promise. And then I didn't necessarily mean right now. These flexi terms that very often are a neurotypical understanding, that if I say, yeah, we can, in a bit, in a minute, well, it's been a minute, and then it's a broken promise. So it's remembering that actually saying, yes, we can do that at this time and doing it, that's going to bring joy. It's going to top up the energy. Having calm time, stimming, if you're not familiar with the term stimming, that's those kind of movements that we do, what we need. It might be with a fidget toy. It might be swinging, the physical motion, proprioceptive input. So proprioception is that kind of movement through space and where we are in our surroundings. It could be being on a swing at the playground or whizzing round on the roundabout. What are the things that bring them joy? What really tops them up? And it doesn't have to be big or expensive or huge. It can be watching your favorite TV show with your cuddliest cozies on, with a big blanket and your favorite snack. These are things that we want to find. Yes, there's going to be big stuff on the list, but what are the little everyday things that you can top up constantly? And particularly thinking, what are things at school that are accessible, that still work within their kind of remit of what is viable at school? You know, you can't take in your pet dog. What can we do instead that's topping up that energy? So I really like the term, we hear a lot about triggers. So triggers are those things that are difficult and they withdraw our energy. I love the term glimmers. We've got triggers and we've got glimmers. Glimmers are those lovely deposits. Now, common triggers for meltdown, take a little look at these things. Again, a lot of those are things that we've already discussed. What I will pick up on there and really highlight is rejection sensitive dysphoria. So this is taking rejection. It's not just were they being a bit rude, or did they not want me to play? It's finding very, very tiny things and feeling like it's your fault. The person doesn't like you anymore. You know, they didn't pick my reading. They didn't ask me to read out loud. They must think I'm rubbish, and going into that spiral. And rejection sensitivity is really heightened with neurodivergent people and autistic children. And it feels like a physical pain, that sense of rejection and huge anxiety that it causes. that will trigger that meltdown or shutdown very, very easily. So all those things on there, fear of failure, not being able to say how you feel, or feeling awkward about saying what you need, masking, all of these things are going to be triggers that can really set that meltdown into action. So what we need is to know our glimmers, to know your young person's glimmers, what bring them that joy, what's going to balance out their energy. So have a little look through those. For me, it's something as simple as this time of year, seeing snowdrops, or when the bluebells come out. For me, I get a silly grin on my face. It brings me such joy. I know to reset, if I'm really struggling, going for that 5-minute walk, somewhere where I know I'm going to spot those flowers, it's a glimmer. Lighting a lovely candle, the scent, which I find calming, seeing the flickering flame is a real glimmer for me, literally. Dressing, dopamine dressing, bright colours. I love bright colours. I hadn't realised all the years I was masking, I really muted myself. And actually now, with all this understanding, it's finding the things that bring you that spark of joy. And again, it's simple things that you know that they'll be able to access at school, that you can talk about, or if you're the teacher, that you think, yeah, actually in our sensory room, we've got some calm fairy lights, might be 2 minutes with that is going to help to reset, and it's going to boost that energy back up. So how can we help? How do we do this? You can use lots of different techniques to explain. So we've got the spoon theory, and you might be familiar with this. This is a lovely one, particularly for younger children, because you can make it physical. You can make it like a role play, or you can, get them their own, like you see on here, lots of different coloured spoons. And you could say to them, however many feels appropriate, 5 if they're very little, 10 if they're older. And you explain to them, right, we start the day and you've got 10 spoons, and give them those spoons. And then you say, what are we doing today? Okay, you're going to school. How does school make you feel? Oh, I'm a bit tired. Okay, give me 3 spoons, because actually you're at school for a really long day, aren't you? I'm going to take 3 of your spoons. Oh, okay. And we're going to go on the bus, and the bus is a bit noisy. Maybe that's going to take another one of your spoons. And then they might say, oh, I don't like it when I arrive on the playground. Everyone's chattering and people try and hug me and it's just too much. Well, I'm going to take another 2 spoons. And you can then show them, hang on a minute, we haven't even got to school and you've only got a few spoons left. You've only got 3 or 4. This isn't good. We need to top your spoons up. How do we do that? Well, I like patting the dog. I like to say goodbye to the dog and have a big cuddle. Okay, well, we need to give a little bit more time to that. So we're going to spend 5 minutes before we go to school cuddling the dog, and I'm going to give you 2 spoons back for that. And very quickly, you can build up, like animating that with them. So using that spoon theory and saying, am I prepared to give my spoon? And when they're older and they can just picture this, oh, you're going to go to that club after school. Okay, well, you've been saying that you find that quite stressful, and actually you're already feeling unwell today. You've not been enjoying it lots. Does that deserve a spoon today? Or do you need to save that spoon? Because actually then you've got something you want to do afterwards. Are you going to have enough spoons to do both? So you can make spoon theory quite lovely. You can use it physically. You can kind of metaphorically do it. Spoon theory is a really nice way of explaining that, topping up, giving away the energy and taking it back. And then you've got the energy accounting example like this, which is more of a balance sheet. So if you've got a young person, maybe who's slightly older or going towards like late primary and teen, and perhaps they're quite analytical and they really like lists. My daughter really likes lists. She likes to be very ordered. She likes to really balance out, like the pro-con idea. You can use a chart. You can literally list all those things that work. What's good, what's bad, what withdraws, what deposits. They can design their chart, they can add visuals, they can add pictures. She loves a PowerPoint. She loves to design things. They could do it on the computer. If they're younger, they can put stickers, they can colour in. That idea that they're taking ownership of their energy, and actually they can choose what to give their energy to. Yes, we know that we have to go to school today, but what can we do to make sure that we're getting that recharge, that top up? And then this is a really useful resource to share with school or to share with clubs and activities, with leaders who will be with your child when you're not. So all kinds of visual aids are really, really helpful. Again, you might have a simple chart like this, like with the battery idea of going up and down. It can be something that they look at each day. Again, if they're older, they might want to use it almost like journaling and actually account for their energy that day and identify what worked and what didn't. But that might feel like a chore. That in itself might be draining. It might feel like another task. So we don't want to put pressure on to have to do that. It's more building that awareness and then using the tool as and when they feel they need it. But it will just be a really good activity for you as a parent or a carer or the teacher who's with them when you're struggling to understand, why are they responding that way? Why do they seem so exhausted? When my daughter comes home, and she's now preteen, you know, secondary school, there are days where I can't understand. It seems like, well, it hasn't been too busy a day and she's had nice lessons and she is absolutely exhausted. And even knowing all this and understanding this, I remind myself, I use these tools to think, actually, she's transitioned from the weekend. She's gone into a busy school environment. She's gone from calm to chaos. She's gone from no demands to endless demands. It really helps us as the adults in their life to support them in their energy accounting. So to sum it up, and we're going to go into questions then, thinking about how you can support them, talking things through, but as I said, not in an intense way. Try and kind of keep the focus and the pressure off. Support with family and friends to understand their needs. So if you have family members that are sort of saying, well, they're young, they should have more energy than that, with their consent, sharing as much as they're comfortable with, but explaining and getting families to understand they are working so much more every day in their basic interactions, so they need a rest too. Supporting them to understand what they need, keeping routine, keeping things predictable as far as you can. Changes happen in life, but as far as we can, giving that predictability, and creating a calm and safe space, a calm area that they can use, and just giving them that space at the end of a busy day. I remember, and my parents now go, oh, yeah, you did always need to just come in and not talk to anyone for an hour. That's not antisocial. It's not being rude. It's not being mean. That is survival sometimes, to just decompress, and it's boosting that energy. So remember that if it feels hard when they come in and they don't want to talk to you, it's actually helping to balance their energy. So to sum it all up, if we can help them balance their energy, we're going to reduce anxiety. We're going to find that they can enjoy their social time more, enjoy school more, manage school more. It's going to reduce the risk of shutdowns, meltdowns, and burnout. And it's going to help create a positive neurodivergent identity, which is so important. It's also going to increase the ability for them to self-advocate, which is really important as they grow older. If we set that off when they're young, it's going to help them as they grow. You'll find more information on our links and things, which I know Louise has already shared. So there are lots more resources that you can find, and obviously workshops here. But I think that takes us into questions. Louise, if you want to share with me anything that I can hopefully help with.